Welcome back to Highway Through Health. We're not a crisis line, we're not a therapy show, and we're not licensed healthcare providers. What we are is a place where lived experience is taken seriously because too many people have discovered the more clearly they speak, the worse they're treated. We share personal experience not to give medical advice, but so that when people encounter the kinds of situations we discuss, they're ready to recognize patterns and respond effectively. This show is about language, power, and what happens when systems stop listening and start translating people into problems. If you've ever felt misheard, mislabeled, or punished for staying coherent under pressure, you're in the right place. Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Hello. All right. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good today. Oh, better. Yeah, I got sick wasn't too long ago. It started off, I had this pain in my chest, and then, I started getting my what's left of my finger swelling and things of that nature.
Yeah.
And, you feel that degradation stuff coming on. And I don't know about you, but as I go through that, and I'm nauseous for about two
Yeah.
days. And I hate going through that, but I'll tell you what, at the end of that, I talk about coming out more focused than I ever was before I went into it. I mean, it kind of reinforced for me back how much this stuff really works because I knew that, I was not going to have a good couple days. I wasn't going to try and fake it. There was none of that going on. You just got to get through it and, and start putting the techniques, start putting that energy, emotion stuff to work in spite of it, in that defiance mode. And I'm not going to take this mode. I'm not going to let this chew me up and spit me out kind of mode. Even though it hurts, you push back. And at the end of that, the other night, I was sitting there kind of like falling into a semi prayer mode. And I'm like, what else do I got to do? It's like, get rid of that. Because at that point, all that stuff I'd struggled with going through that illness phase, suddenly I felt that emotionally. I couldn't put it all in words yet, but I knew, okay, that's got to go, that's got to go, that's got to go, that's got to go. And started working on it, and yep, here comes more peace because I'm like, I'm not going to let the psych industry upset me or get in my way of expressing things anymore. I'm way past the point of worrying about getting kidnapped by them again because I think I'll put up a pretty good fight to prevent that from happening. So I don't know. I I feel like I broke through a little bit of a barrier there this week, so that's a good thing.
That's a real positive. And I understand because oddly enough, I some of my nerve pain really started acting up. And I get on my left side. And I'd even had a biopsy done on that and all. This is years ago.
Mhm.
And they were purposely ignoring all of my physical issues, purposely probably had even written out of my medical records entirely that I have bad heart problems and I've had a valve problem and other issues from the time they knew this from the time I was about 8 or 9. So sometime in the latter
Mhm.
part of the 70s, they already knew, and they knew I had a heart murmur going way back before that. But anyway, that will sometimes that foot used to swell up so bad it looked like a Macy's float, like I couldn't even get
Yep.
socks on. But I didn't necessarily have the swelling this time around, but I had that crushing nerve pain, and I went, "Oh my God, I can't believe that this has come back." Now, granted, but I did think to myself, I thought, now look, I used to have that constantly for like
Mhm.
it was years on end. I mean, I
Yeah.
didn't ever think I was going to get rid of it. So to actually have it back, but then I said, God, I know that this is going to fade as miserable as I am. And it went on for like a couple days. I was still able to move it, so I didn't have the immobility, but that crushing nerve pain was there.
Mhm.
And sure enough, it did fade. And I thought to myself, well, just being able to sit with it, to being able to pray through it, to know that it was going to go away, and then it was a reminder of what I used to live with every day, not necessarily on bilateral, like I didn't have the bone pain, thank you, Jesus, on the one side, in addition to that. But and my back was acting on because it's all like sciatic all down because I have scoliosis as
Yeah.
well. And I thought, what a miracle, what a gift that I don't have that constantly anymore. So to just have that sort of that taste of it, and to be able to move through it and past it is really something. And you had mentioned the nausea, and that comes from me from like heart problems because when I first got the cyclospora, I honestly
Mhm.
thought it was because of my heart problems and like some maybe minor lupus flare because I have that line. You know how it is. The mucus lining gets very inflamed, and
Mhm.
I thought when it first started up, I thought it was that, and then I was like, oh no, this is the hot trots from a bad peach. I knew at a point when it didn't go away, and I'm like, all right. But even at that, I had become like really adept at like I don't, and I was still that way. Even though when I was like that before, I still made jewelry, I baked, I did things to work around it. I still wrote. That's when I started to get into writing, when I wrote for the magazine and stuff. So it's not as though I ever let that slow me down. Even when the pain was so excruciating, I couldn't even sit comfortably, let alone walk or sleep properly
Right.
or anything. So it's like minor now. And then just considering, like I said, everything that I've been through, from people putting intentional brain damage on me through electrocution and going through
Mhm.
seizures, and now I have to wonder, it really, being able to sit, have my nervous system re-regulate and look at it the larger perspective, um, gives me a real sense of not only accomplishment but of peace, of knowing that God had my back that strongly.
Right.
To use my intuition and my determination and that of what is my soul family to really pull me through this, piece by piece, and to allow myself to be part of the exposure and disclosure of all this that's been going on. And that's when I can sit and say I'm truly grateful. you know
Yep.
it matters.
Yeah, I think we kind of touched earlier this week. Just I was goofing around doing some posting and on the high discernment kind of practices. And so, we're not sitting here saying we hope that all this stuff is going to happen and take all this stuff, but we know it's not.
Mm-mm.
Excuse me. I don't have some kind of crazy fantasy that, that I'm gonna get healed without consequences. I mean, if I get what's left of me right now healed, that there's obviously going to be consequences that are associated with that. It's not a minor thing or a little thing. It would be a big thing. And so then it's more of a, okay, how do you stay calm, cool, and collected through that kind of a thing if and when that should happen? Which takes us back to that issue we've been talking about. It's really that honesty which builds the discernment, which starts to destroy the victimhood. So even though I know that, I don't know what's going to happen the next second onward, is the last rat going to chew through the last wire and the molecules spring off and that's it? You don't know. And you're so sick that it's none of that is even dismissed from possibility. And you mentioned that lupus attack in your chest cavity, that hurts. I mean, that's pushed
Oh
me to
my
the
God.
point where I can't breathe. I've had to sit for hours taking teaspoon-sized breaths just to be if I would breathe harder, it would hurt. It felt like someone was stabbing me
Yeah.
in the lungs with a big knife. It would shut down, literally shut down my breathing. And if you panic during that kind of event while
Oh
that's
my
going
God,
on, you
yes.
won't be able to breathe because you'll go into rebounds back and forth and back and forth. And I
Yeah.
can understand how people having panic attacks get that way. But what we're saying is we deliberately train ourselves not to do that. And that is a substantial practice that does, believe it or not, require a ton of honesty. It says, yeah, you can be defiant. You don't have to be subservient to some kind of somebody else's expectations. In fact, you can't be most likely if you're going to battle your disease the right way and keep the emotions flowing and keep some kind of semblance of life going, instead of just completely giving up. So, and it is unfortunate that we use when we're describing it biblically, I think you and I both agree that when we look at it, look at the Bible passages, we're seeing people who have actually crossed over. We're seeing people who have either done it at will, which is what Jesus said he could do when he died daily, to people who've done it a little bit just to understand what it's like so they can help other people understand what that pathway looks like and so they can take it and find out for themselves. Because we're not doing the cult thing here. We're not doing the synanon thing. We don't have people going in and screaming at them. I think the majority of this can be done fun, just putting energy in motion in a good way. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
we, there's an Isaiah 65 way out of every problem. If we can just start getting over this notion, getting past this idea that we have to stigmatize immersive spiritual events. And we really need to add nuance into these words like psychosis and, all the eugenics era stuff that has done you and I so much damage for way, way, way too long.
Oh yeah. Way too much. And furthermore, we need to get away from not the eugenics, not just in the pseudoscience of psychiatry, but just in general. I've
Hmm.
seen far too much damage. I know with my adopted mother, I mean, that poor woman was being used as a petrochemical dumping ground. And
Yeah.
I hated so much that she suffered so much, and I wasn't able to do anything for her because the more drugs they added, the worse she became. And and they were carpet bombing me at that time too after a phony baloney, mislabeling diagnosis. So
Hmm.
after I got on what they were giving me, I started to do a lot better, but they were still giving me benzos and still weren't giving me alternatives to deal with what was going on. Had we actually had some practical help, had I had better information, had she not been on so many drugs, had medical marijuana been available at the time,
Right.
had I known what I know now, I could have advocated so much differently for her. I could have been able to fix things, and my own pain wasn't being dealt with properly at the time. So my own health issues that got far worse after that, petrochemical, neurotoxic drug bombing. Um,
Hmm.
I, Things could have been so much different, but that's where it needs to just be torn down. We need to take our own power back as we the people. We need to be able to set up frameworks and things that are a lot more expanded, that
Right.
look at things in an expanded way. I consider myself an eternal energy, a spiritual eternal energy first. Uh,
Hmm.
and, and with that, with my soul group, then split into a smaller soul group, and then me as an individual incarnation in this lifetime, in this particular
Right.
meat suit. And that's just how I look at the and I look at it like I'm every day returning to my soul family, because that's really what life is. So I look at things with a much more expanded perspective. I would appreciate it if people would respect the expanded perspective that you and I have, the ability to take care of our own health, the ability that we have to make decisions that we know are right for us. And I want that to be able to translate to the larger population. Um,
Hmm.
I know nobody's doing any good with this dumping of these drugs. Certainly not children. I'm horrified by the things that have happened. The ADHD drugs are only one molecule off of meth. It's not a surprise then that these
Right.
children are growing up addicted. I'm sickened by this. They are setting them
Hmm.
up for failure. Furthermore, and they'll tell you this in the addiction community as well. But it really is true. When somebody starts reaching for an exogenic source for some kind of internal, what they should be finding an internal locus of control, but instead are turning to an external source, they remain trapped at that maturity level. They remain trapped with those emotions stuck in them. They never move through them. It doesn't get the chance to flush out of the system. They don't have the opportunity for any kind of resilience, for learning to sit with pain, for learning to appreciate lessons that might be being taught. There's not all of that gets cut out. Any kind of evolution through life gets cut out by drugs. And that's whether
Yeah.
it's a street drug, But it's even worse when they're forcing it onto children that they don't even have an opportunity to know themselves or grow through
Right.
life or move through life in a healthy way with a decent perspective, with that internal, intuition on and that locus of control. It really is just a death industry.
Hmm.
All of it is, and we really, like I say, I'm very glad that we're having exposure along with the disclosure, um, that Dr. Greer has talked about, because he's certainly somebody that's been in the mix with understanding about different brain states, different brain waves,
Hmm.
how that is mixed in spiritually with looking at a larger universe. And it's about time that that gets respected. All of this with being funded, and they've attempted to weaponize spirituality and attempted to just weaponize a lot of things,
Right.
shut down critical thinking and shut down any type more expansive thoughts, all for the sake
Hmm.
of the Wall Street elites and the oligarchs, and things that, you know, both presidents, Roosevelt actually had tried to get ahead of and put the kibosh on, but you
Yeah.
always have these in the background, these Gilded Age ghouls and goons that were pulling strings. It's like, one step forward, two goose steps back, and that
Hmm.
really is a shame. And we're seeing history repeat. So I think now that we have people like you and I that have information, that we sit here, and anybody can listen to how sensibly we talk, that we've certainly, have had our own experiences, but do our own homework. We read the Bible, we read science. We're, nothing is being ignored here. They're the ones ignoring the science. They're the ones
Right.
who ignore facts. They're the ones who are, in their parlance, delusional, because they're just making up whatever thing fits a billing process, whatever lines their
Yep.
pockets with blood money. And that's the way it needs to be looked at. I'm tired of the soft language that's really come into play, certainly in the past 75 years. I'm done with that. George Carlin used to
Right.
do a whole bit about
It's
soft
done us no
language.
good.
That's right. That's
Yeah. I mean,
exactly
the
right.
more stuff pedal around an issue, especially an issue as critical as this one, is, the cuts to the heart of individual, but also social sovereignty. I mean,
Yes.
this is about, the destruction of victimhood, the destruction of manipulation. You look at MK Ultra, you look at all the things that have been gone on, and we know that there's tons and tons and tons of them. And now I'm reading about Synanon, which appears to be a little bit more than a bridge of the MK Ultra into, what, some civilian program, which was another behavioral control freak program that sounds like a lot of it was modeled off of the North Korean, propaganda stuff, which was studied by MK Ultra,
Yes.
which that all came about right before then. So, oh no, now we got the chemical imbalance theory. So that kind of bridged a little bit of a gap through the 60s there as they were, trying to figure out what's going on and how do we get all these hippies to start loving capitalism again and stop talking about peace, love, and justice. So,
Yeah.
and they did it. They did it. They did a good job derailing that whole thing. But yeah, so it's my goal really to explain this thing in such a way that nobody has to be taken advantage of by some shyster preacher who's selling, fear, or this is not what we're talking about. We're talking about a shift in understanding. And we've also said very clearly we don't have all the answers, but we're not going to deny our experiences. So we can either have a respectful dialogue around respecting our experiences or just get out of the picture. We don't need you. We don't need name calling. We don't need this threats of court action. We don't need this, we're going to lock you up, even though I've got pictures and evidence beyond, anything that anybody wanted to consider. It just turned into a big persecution party. So it wasn't, first it was overt, then it went soft. But I know what a label like that means. I know darn well what it means. And I dare you. I dare you to do it again. Try it again.
Yeah. That's
That's
why
my.
they're afraid of me, because they know I've got like dirt, deep dirt on them, and they don't want me in court. And I know, and they know I know it. And my thing is, here I have all along been trying to report the fraud, the abuse, all of it.
Mhm.
And No, and all they kept doing was reverse engineering off what I was reporting instead of actually helping me, instead of actually stopping doing what they're doing. Much like Johnson and Johnson with the talc, it's really no different.
Right.
And of course, we see them involved with the extraordinary neurotoxic poisons of risperidone and Invega, which are essentially the
Hmm.
same thing, and Lilly with Zyprexa. So all of this, they already know that it causes cancer. That's coming out. There are lawsuits about that. And my thing has been, why in the hell are you even leaving this on the market? Furthermore, why are you having courts force people to do this if it's not eugenics? And nobody wants to answer me on that, meaning these
Right.
folks. And they know that I know, and they know that I've been very vocal about it. So they know I've got them by the short and curly. So I'm really not worried. They already know everything I'm going to take into court, including my
Hmm.
ID, my former Maryland State ID, which is supposed to be good for 8 years, but somehow that mine was only good for a year and some change. So I already knew that somebody had declared me dead and cashed in on fraudulent life insurance policies because I had died a few times. So
Hmm.
it's this butcher who was in charge of a lot of this in several states, not just Maryland. Um, my guess is that she has gotten herself. It's quite a lucrative thing for her, and
Hmm.
these other folks who work this, because this is a multi-state fraud ring. It's not, you know.
That's easy to pull off, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It
I
really
mean,
is. And me having to live with the abuser, and it's really unfortunately for anybody who's had to live with an abuser and be
mhm.
that a parent doing it to a child, it's very easy to weaponize this so-called mental health and behavioral health against someone who, in my case, autistic. So it was unfortunate. It was real easy. And now that I've read more and more about it, it really is, as we've talked about, like a cult. About how you
Yeah.
deplete somebody's income, you earn their trust for fraudulent purposes, you exploit that power and control,
Hmm.
and it really, other than cults don't operate through the court system, the pseudoscience of psychiatry does. And they figured out how to do it in a way that discredits anybody that tries to walk away. And this is where
Hmm.
people should be rightfully extraordinarily horrified. They're giving these drugs now. Some men are giving them to their wives or significant others and raping them and uploading it onto a computer site. I forget
Hmm.
the name of it, but nobody should be surprised. Those drugs are extremely
No.
damaging tranquilizers. And this is where they're, oh, about opioids. No, you know what? Be very, very conscientious about those drugs instead. Not to say you
Yeah.
shouldn't, but we should be moving more toward plant-based medicine. Medical marijuana is not addictive. Opioids are. It's a whole different chemical uh, body
Oh
reaction.
yeah.
So that's that, and I'm glad. So I'm glad they're starting to decriminalize. I think that, again, for me, I want to be able to set up a framework and curriculum for doctors who really do have an interest in prescribing medical marijuana for pain, for other conditions. Uh,
Sure.
because there are ways of taking it that don't make anybody like, oh, spacey and high. And even if you have like more of a reaction than you would prefer, you can just eat some black pepper and it takes that right down. So there's a lot of things that are much more beneficial, and when you know how to fine tune
Right.
it to deal with whatever particular issues. So I'm glad that we're seeing steps in the right direction for some things, because it's needed to
Hmm.
happen for a while. Opioids, they stop working after a while, and they really, for me, I had far better pain relief and far more comprehensive relief of a lot of symptomology with the medical marijuana when I was combining that with nutrition and looking up the strains and understanding what each one does.
Yeah.
And this is the direction that we need to be going. So I'll be glad
I agree. I
that
mean,
happened. Yeah.
that's an incredible from anti-inflammatory. There's nothing that beats
Yes.
it.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
a fact. I don't care what
Yeah.
anybody says. I mean, when somebody from my context anyway that has to deal with that level of inflammation that
Mhm.
destroys connective tissue and joints and everything else, yeah, it's a massive help. But I also understand where people can kind of get a little too into the concentrates and not give themselves a break, and they start getting into their own head. And then now we're hearing, psychosis everywhere. And another reason why I think we got to get this reform going
Yes.
fast. To your earlier point, I think one of the reasons why they don't want psychiatrists to testify in court is the Supreme Court has ruled that they have an opinion, and they're not expert opinions, it's an opinion. So once you really take a shot out of the notion that there's some expertise involved in that opinion, then it substantially reduces their case. But when you're doing the kind of things like you and I are doing, we're showing that they're highly prejudicial with respect to
Yeah.
spiritual experiences about that
Very.
language and about their behavior, and that they are hostile and more than willing to make people's lives as miserable as possible just to push their ideology. And that's being run through courtrooms. When you show that in a court, that's a whole nother level of indictment of the industry,
Yes.
So, and they are the people who have been saying, how long were they sitting on? Well, if we go back to that, they were narcotics addiction. We're going to cure you of your narcotics addiction. So back then, marijuana was classified as a narcotic. So that would have been a synonym. We'll come in, we'll beat you up, we'll belittle you, we'll make you change marital partners, we'll do all kinds of things like that to you to get you
Yes.
to beat that, narcotics addiction. And um, and so eh, there's been nothing good come out of this. There's been, these kinds of abuses have just gone on for way, way, way too long. So they're going to keep fighting us. They don't want this in court. That's why they settle out of court. They don't
Yes.
want to go near one. But
Yes.
sooner or later, they're going to get drug into
Oh yeah.
one way or another. Because I think, back when this happened to me, if somebody would have said, "Yeah, the military has photos of star-shaped UFOs flying around battlefields," everybody went, "Yeah, right, sure." Well, just published them not too long ago, and what's making that fly around? And I really, when you look at what happened, my thing happened to me on the first day of the blood moon tetrad when I knew nothing about really what a blood moon tetrad was until that afternoon when I went, uh-oh, this changes everything. And when that gets inserted into the picture, you have to understand that these things are omens. They're not minor things that are going on around here. This is a lot of notification that says, "Hey, you guys, you really need to change your assumptions on a lot of areas because fundamentally you're skidding off into the danger zone here." And we really are. So of course, that's what they try to label as a schizo thing. And again, I think that what it tries to do as a profession is belittle religious practice and the very real benefits that come from religious practice, premonitions. Um, I stay
Yeah.
away from making predictions, but if I have a really intense, vivid dream, I know something's going to happen that's going to come along the lines of that kind of a thing. And I don't run around trying to make predictions, but I get a sense of what's going to happen and what's not going to happen.
Yes.
And I know that the people who, lie for a living have a real short or on a pretty short leash and don't have much of a future. So, you
Yes.
know, you,
Well,
you
the we've seen with the Nazis too that they certainly had a lot of sacred knowledge and things that they intentionally misused. There's a whole three-part documentary series. I haven't
mhm,
watched it, I'm ready to, but I mean, I had known this, and I've even seen like smaller presentations, including from the one gentleman. Was a former service member. Has an awesome YouTube channel. He's excellent. I think his channel is called Hidden History, and he's done like a fairly decent presentation on that too. So we've seen that, and of course they used the pseudoscience of psychiatry. So, and we do know that everything that they were doing came back to the United States via Project Paperclip, and that's where we see
mhm,
certainly what happened in Edgewood. That's horrible. And I always
yep,
feel very strongly about speaking up and out for those poor veterans and those troops because they had to sign non disclosure agreements just because this was military. I'm going to speak out because I wasn't.
Yeah.
So now I feel a very much a sense of pride and a sense of obligation to make sure that people know about this. This is horrific. And this is what has,
Hmm.
and Hopkins was very directly involved with Project Paperclip, MK Ultra, and the CIA. And I've
Right.
seen the paperwork. It's true. So everything that was going on with me via Hopkins, I feel very, very strongly about. Also, to your point, there's been an obfuscation. Certainly, Rockefeller was fooling with vibration and all this. We know that they changed the vibration of music. That was intentional. He was working closely with the Nazis to accomplish that goal, and it happened. And that's as television was being developed. And then, of course, we know that there's 30 Rock, 30 Rockefeller Center, and
Hmm.
where
Yep.
embassy is. So we see like a certain amount of corporation, corrupt corporate money still funding things that they wanted this kind of outsized power and control over people. And they may have
Right.
initially wanted it for advertising, but then it got into far more sinister things. So of course we've always had black ops and trying to fund that and weaponize things. And that
Yeah.
certainly would go along with MK Ultra, mind control, and trying to keep people in a false materialistic sense. So that serves the purpose of oligarchs. It serves the purpose of corrupt corporations. And it serves weaponization purposes as well. So we're
Yeah.
seeing this exposed, and I'm very glad. I know telepathy is real. I've experienced it on a couple different levels before, and I think one of the major things, this might even make me cry if I talk about this. Um, I knew that as all this was going on, after they had electrocuted me and all this, and I had come back, and this was after my last cat had passed away. And there was somebody in the back of my brain that I kept thinking about. Who's like a writer and creative person and all this. And for some reason, I was thinking to myself, um, and I was also talking to God too. And one day I was looking around and I knew there was no escape from where I was. And my old handler, Mr. X, he was just a handler,
Yeah.
wasn't, you know, and I'd been trying to leave for years at this point. But one day I looked around and I said, well, blank, I'm not going to say this other gentleman's name. I'm not talking about my ex, I'm talking about the person I was thinking of. I said,
Hmm.
blank, this is what hell looks like. You wanted to know what hell looks like. And I walked around and I started touching like my old blankets and smelling it because there wasn't hardly anything in there. I looked at my Rush albums in particular, my Rubik's Cube, because a lot of times when I need to think and I have like, I've replaced some of my Rush CDs since I've been here and I got a new Rubik's Cube. When I really needed to think about something or sort something out in my head, this is part of my autism. That's what I would do. I would listen to Rush albums and I'd sit there and just play with the Rubik's Cube until I could kind of get
Yeah.
myself together. And I said, blank, this is what hell looks like. This is what hell smells like. And I looked at my old books in the bookcase and just everything was very detailed. And I can still, in a very sensorial way, um, I still feel it. I can still smell it. I touched the
Right.
carpet. I looked at the shade of the carpet and I touched it. And I said, look around. I said, this is what it is. This is hell. This is hell, blank, blank. This is hell.
Hmm.
And recently I found out that when this gentleman does interviews for some of the things that he works on, that's a question he asks. What do you think the afterlife is? What do you think? And I thought, oh, wow, I didn't know that. And somewhere in that same sort of discussion, because this was like somebody else was kind of talking about this, who had worked
Right.
with him before. They even mentioned a Rubik's cube, and I went, "Oh, this is a little weird." but I thought to myself, see, and you can tell too when people share a vibration, and like I said, when we talk about soul family and all, that's a very
Hmm.
natural telepathy because we're the same eternal energy. So we're on the same wavelength. We need to talk about wavelength, talk about vibration and all that. And
Yeah.
considering we're made of that, it really isn't as bizarre as it may sound to some people. It's not really so outside the box. It sounds a lot
No.
more natural. Um, And when you think of the GATE program, or things that they were doing at the Monroe Institute and all this stuff that they had been studying for years with different with children and other people at the CIA, and again, in an attempt to weaponize, nobody should be so surprised, you know.
No.
And they need to quit pretending. They just project. It's everything that they're doing. They want to project, oh, you're crazy, oh, you're this, because they know that when somebody else is smarter than they are, more gifted, is inclined toward peace, is inclined toward having their own intuition, making their own decisions, being a positive person, they don't like that. They
No.
really feel very threatened by somebody who thinks critically, who has a much more expanded viewpoint, who realizes their own sovereignty, their own power, and will do good things. They just don't like that. They want everyone to be as selfish, materialistic, egoic, destructive, uh, stunted growth, selfish as they are. And I
Hmm.
certainly am not having it. I know you're not having it, and it seems like a lot of other people aren't having it either. You know,
Right.
and when you look at the pills, these are drugs. These neurotoxic poisons have right on there that they cause suicidal ideation, can cause homicidal ideation. Well, what in the hell are you court ordering people to take crap like that for? It's not even sensible. And
Yeah.
I think now that these are the questions that people are coming to the table with and saying, no, I don't want this garbage. It makes me sick. And that was what I was saying all along. And they weren't about to keep twisting my words anymore, and they knew that, and they knew
Hmm.
that. And even though they did try to kill me, because at this point I'm calling it attempted murder. I'm not sure what was going on during the time of the seizures, but even if this was just me having a reaction to what was happening, somebody should have gotten me the fuck out of there, particularly
Yeah.
knowing that I was living with an abuser and an identity thief, but the ones I was asking for help
Hmm.
were the ones colluding with him. It really was a very toxic situation. Um,
Yeah. There's no such thing as advocacy at all.
no,
None. They may have a
no,
title, you know,
um,
they might have one that runs around with in a Halloween costume or something, but they don't have
yeah,
any real advocates going on there. None.
no,
It's not
no,
happening. The
no.
only advocacy is for the drugging. We're going to contrive
That's it.
a reason, a rationale to drug you with shove this drug that doesn't work into people that don't need it, not because it does any
Right.
good, but because we get rich doing it, and you're just going to shut up and go along with it because we're getting rich doing it and you're not. So,
Mm-hmm.
we're the ones that are going to tell you what to do. We're the new class. We're your new overlords. Is basically what the medical industry is telling us, and they're telling us that they're going to have the freedom to interpret our spiritual experiences, our life experiences, pretty much every experience that we have. They're going to have a way to, pathologize it.
Yeah.
If you don't have the right political affiliation, or if you don't, if you're not afraid to advocate for universal justice, if you're not afraid to advocate for biblical literacy in a way that's way bigger than anything anybody ever thought of, if you're not one of those people that will just sit there and shut up and not make waves, they want to find a way to shut you up. That's fact,
Yeah.
and they're doing it. They've with all those behavioral modification and control programs, they've learned the kind of lingo they need to do. They know the kind of intimidation they have to apply. Isolate, intimidate,
Yes.
threaten, label,
Coerce.
pathologize, yeah, coerce, play up victimhood. Oh, you're sick. Oh, we'll help you. Oh, we care. Oh, it's all in good faith. And it's all crap.
Oh yeah. Yeah. They know it, and they're lining their pockets with blood money, and people can see the bribery. It's not as though it's not obvious. You
Not
know,
hard to see. It's right out there.
it really is. And I know it's about to collapse. So when I was telling you about that group in France that got caught doing a lot of fraudulence and all, also called Sante, and they want to pretend like it's not related to the Sante here in the States that's in Maryland that was
Hmm.
doing fraud in California, or Asante group out in Oregon. It's all the same thing. It's
Hmm.
all the same corporation. They are using the same framework, the same playbook, the same big harm of
Oh yeah.
nonsense, and I'm glad Fauci is on trial. So I think we'll, maybe be able to have the door cracked open a little bit more about all this, just this nonsense, the lobbyist of Big Pharma, and how long it's gone on, and just how bad it's gotten. And it's been happening for a very long time. It's not new, and it needs to stop.
Yeah. I hope people really study the sanctimony, the intimidation, all the tactics that were used to derail people who knew darn well that was a lab created
Oh, yes.
whatever it is.
Yes.
And not only on top of that, but all the stuff that went into coercing, intimidating, threatening people to take a vaccine that had little to no
Yeah.
effectivity. Don't give me this 98%, it was less than 2%, that
Yeah.
caused all kinds of damages.
Many,
Um,
many.
they they used it as an opportunity to rag on ivermectin. They used it as an opportunity to push remisiv. I can't even pronounce it, but I hear the
Remdesivir,
nurses
I
call
think
it
it was
run,
called.
run death is near.
Yeah, that's
You know,
that's better.
and that whole thing needs to be put
Yes,
under a microscope, and it's way
yeah,
beyond Fauci. I mean, he had
yes,
just acres of enablers, and that
yeah,
whole supremacist mindset that was used to push
yes,
that garbage in the first place.
yes,
We get 10 times that when we run into one of these psych people because they have run amok for generations now, and they show no sign of doing anything other than getting more and more and more out of control. The more power they get, the more unhinged they get. It's like what we're witnessing. I don't know what we're witnessing in our political class today, but just other than a complete discernment, detachment, and meltdown. And how long do we sit around and just say, wait a minute, where's the process that's supposed to keep this from happening? What's going on? What's broken here? Because something is very seriously broken right now.
yeah. There's
Uh,
there's been a whole a mindset, and they've known this. They've laid the groundwork for a very long time. And again, Jefferson was scared about this happening. So as far
mhm.
back as the founding of the country, about the two-party system. So
Yep.
you've had, and it's really been an enhancement of this black and white thinking. So not really thinking critically, not really thinking outside the box. And again, going back to Teddy Roosevelt, I mean, part of the assassination attempt was he was a third party candidate. So,
Mhm.
because they know that you can't play both ends against the middle when you have a third party in there. When you have, and this is unfortunately, Perot didn't win. I was a huge Perot supporter. I voted for him.
Yeah.
He made a lot of sense with things, and a lot of stuff that I was worried was going to come to fruition via NAFTA and all has actually happened. I mean, it just made our economy a lot more in the toilet,
Yep.
among other things. So I mean, but it really has been this playing off one and another. But the big corporations, all these corrupt corporations, the Wall Street elites, they're paying for whatever, and now you got lobbyists in there that are writing the collect laws and just basically buying people to sign them. That's really all
Mhm.
that's been going on, and it's been happening for 100 years, and it's needed to stop for a long time. So it really bears out that it's not a surprise that we've gotten to this point. That society has had a certain amount of, as Devo would put it, de-evolution, and that would be exactly correct. Um, you don't, and this is really what Rockefeller and a lot of these folks were aiming for, a population that was more brainwashed and taught what to think, not how to think, and people fighting with one another as opposed to fighting the corruption. It
Yep.
it's been a very major it's been a major problem for far too long, and it's the way they've wanted that set up. And unfortunately, that's you end up getting what you got. And like I said, I know we've had a lot of medical records have been bought by corrupt corporations and hedge funds and all this private equity, and they've destroyed them. Um, and I know that Hopkins was actively giving some to the Russians. They were caught doing that in 2024, and I don't doubt that mine was among them. And it has to do with the weaponization of and the knowledge of things that are beyond in the universe. I really don't doubt
Mhm.
that. Like just the way they reverse engineered the craft, they reverse engineered how my brain works. The only thing that I can say is that I pray every day that the research that was done on me and the cruelty and the barbarism that I've lived through, the brain damage that I've sustained, in addition to further heart damage and in addition to further nerve damage, I say
Mhm.
every day, and I do believe this to be the case anyway, that somebody will use it to benefit people who have suffered from glioblastoma, Alzheimer's, which my birth mother unfortunately was going through that,
Mhm.
and Parkinson's. So I hope that in that people will take the information, listen to what I have to say in insofar as how I'm recovering or how I'm at least um, allowing my nervous system to re-regulate and to try and
Right.
build off that, how I work around it, then allow people the real knowledge to use it to heal, not to further harm, because that's the only way I can find peace through it. um that's why I say I do think about Gord Downey a lot, and what he went through, suffering from glioblastoma, and I'm like, Gord, let me pick up your pen and pick up where you left off.
Right.
And with even with the Native American and in its case, the Canadian Indigenous folks, so Turtle Island First Nation people, um, and that's why I'm able to see how life is put together, how life is constructed in a much larger way than just what we see this one color of the rainbow when we could be looking at the entire spectrum.
Exactly. And I I could not cope with this disease for 20 years using their frameworks, their ideas, their classifications of
Yes,
emotions and things of that nature. It would have been absolutely impossible. I mean, that experience, the transformative experience that had the healing associated with it, followed by the pictures a few months later,
right.
that happened in 2014, and that's what enabled me to cope with all this stuff I had to cope with. I mean, and even then, if you would have said, now you're going to have to fight this battle for 14 years, I think at that time I would have said, oh my God, no, that's too much. I can't take that, but I did. And after going through that, even, I mean, that just, all it did was reinforce for me exactly how those techniques work and how, it's just this integrated practice and it's got a massive number of benefits. And I just really, I feel bad that we've not been able to make more progress in helping people understand what that is. But there's been, I guess people don't probably understand the kind of stigma that's come down on us. I saw Roger McFillin mentioned on X that he didn't think that the vendor because or stigmatizing because so many people go there. And I reminded him in comments that yes, it is stigmatizing when it's weaponized, used against you. When it's weaponized against spiritual experiences, that absolutely is stigmatizing. When you're telling these people to get out of my life, and they're inventing reasons to insert themselves back into it that aren't going to do you any good whatsoever, that's stigma. They're using stigma to do that. Look at all the abuse that comes out of that thing. Yeah, they may draw people, a lot of people into that mess voluntarily, but their results speak for their own lack of effectiveness.
Yes.
And then when you get to the coercion end of it, then you say this is where it really doesn't make sense. This is where it's really manifest as social control. This is where, you're going to have an allowable definition of what a religious experience is. Outside of that, it's a reason to get you, lock you up, do whatever they have to do to
Yes.
isolate you and make sure you don't spread that kind of thinking out there.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a big danger, and I think we really have to keep speaking out. I wish more people knew how these practices worked. I wish they knew how calming they were. I wish I could, better convey how how to do them. But again, I think fighting stigma has still been the number one thing. So I'm feeling like the rest of the stigma out of the way and start really focusing on talking about the techniques, talking about how they benefit me. Um, I again don't have all the answers, but we're just trying to have some dialogue here, and at least we can have it here without being attacked by people. So that I do appreciate anyway,
Yeah,
because we,
I feel like being able to provide a framework of things that do work, that were around pre-Rockefeller, and being able to actually use the history of what he controlled, what he did, how he did it, and be able to hold that up
Mhm.
and say, listen, this is all about profiteering. It was not ever about healing. Here are the ways that we can bring this back. Vibrational healing, med beds. I'm
Mhm.
hearing now a lot more that this is, coming back into, in a more mainstream way. Nutrition. So I'm very grateful that we do have Bobby Kennedy in there talking about nutrition. We do have Dr. Chris Palmer talking about keto diet. Metabolic Mind Channel on YouTube talks about how that is a much better way of dealing with so-called mental illness, or even
Mhm.
just distress in general. Because once you have a better baseline, you're in a better place. You're not trying to seek out things, teaching people how to sit with their pain and be comfortable with it and use it as an opportunity for growth. That's important. Looking at QHHT and other forms of past life regression hypnotherapy, because again, we've had doctors who have brought that in as science. There have been proven results with this.
Yeah.
Dolores Cannon certainly wrote several books about it, but Dr. Brian Weiss, Dr. Michael Newton, and some of these are folks that weren't, necessarily looking to find out about all this, but since they have, it really brings up a lot of the success stories that they've had with that.
Mhm.
There are just a number of people, and you see Greg Braden talk about, mind heart coherence and all of this that kind of fits all in within all this. So there are people out there who are discussing this. There is very easy to build like a framework around it. So for me, I'm wanting to explain not just what I went through. I mean, that was egregious harm and it was intentional. So even when,
Right.
my ex-minder was screaming at me, can you prove intent? Yeah, motherfucker, I can. And now you're going to be on the hook. I don't wish anybody any harm. I'm just going to say this because my issue isn't the individuals. They were working within a rotten system that allowed this to happen and has even encouraged this to happen and promoted and protected
Mhm.
people who were doing such egregious harm and allowed them, to continue this. So my anger is at the system. I don't like what happened to me, so don't get me wrong. I don't ever want to see any of those people again. They were trying to set me up to be shot. I'm not happy about that. I lost
Yeah.
everything I ever owned. Again, I'm not happy about that. I have people that betrayed me for money that I thought I could trust. I'm certainly not happy about it. But my mission, my goal, my perspective is now so enhanced. I feel very at peace, and very much able to explain certain things and things that are, these concepts that are kind of, maybe difficult for people to wrap their mind around, about where the spirituality and the science connect. And I'm living proof about getting better because, like I said, I had to use crutches to walk around. I didn't ever think I'd be able to walk normally again.
Yeah.
I still got heart problems. I still got lupus. I still have nerve damage. I have brain damage I didn't need to have. But okay, you know what? That's okay. I can accept that because I'm still working towards positive goals. I'm still living my purpose. I'm doing
Right.
this so that other people don't have to go through it, but yet I can be a very real, practical example of what can happen, but also that God is greater in power. God will help you
Absolutely.
overcome. So I feel like I'm living the example that's supposed to be. And I remember Mr. X, he got real upset when I, oh, what you think you're Jesus? I said, because he was getting real upset when I was accusing him of accepting 12 pieces of silver, start throwing stuff around the apartment and all. And I'm like, well,
Mm,
it just proves to me that I'm right. And I knew I was right. And I wasn't surprised. So being able to leave that situation, it's, to me, it's just, I don't really think about him that much. And like I say, I don't wish him any harm. This is the thing. People don't
mm,
realize that when you do feel very at peace with yourself and you can understand and look at things from a much larger perspective and the complexity of things. I mean, I lived with the dude for 20 years. I'm sorry he didn't have good intentions. That and I was trying to leave for the past 5 or 6 or whatever it was. But
mm,
the thing is still, I feel sorry for the person that he was pretending to be, because if he could pretend to be a decent person, then I would imagine he had that potential to be a decent person. And I feel sorry for whatever he must have gone through in life that led him to think to treat another human being like fat trash and
right.
chattel property.
Hmm.
I don't, whatever that is, it is. But clearly something, and I pray that God will be able to allow him, because nobody who feels is going to be able to do that. So I want him to be able to have that kind of peace. I'm glad that we worked out our karma from last lifetime. I know that was necessary. I know that my sister and BFF from my last lifetime have my back. So I'm more invested in reuniting with them, and feeling
Hmm.
about that and feeling confident about the things that I have in my future, and being able to work in expanding what we talk about and building this framework, and making sure that we're heard,
Right.
um, for the reality that and the experiences that we've had. That's more important to me,
And
you
we
know.
shouldn't be penalized for having certainty about the point that we are going to be healed someday. And I'm not saying this isn't hopium speaking. This is a fact. I mean, this is something I walked through, felt I knew what did it, and I also felt the depth of the changes, the transformation that has to take place for that kind of healing to take place. I mean, it's not, you read these stories in the Bible about people getting healed. Don't think that it was just, oh, your skin went back to normal or whatever happened, everything's fine. No, there was a big spiritual experience that went along with that healing,
Oh
that
yeah,
went along with, see, this is all the stuff that attracted to you in the first place. Now, what are you going to do about it? Because what do they all get told? Don't sin anymore. Don't do it again. Now you know what caused it. Don't do it again. So, and now
right,
you know what it does, right? So it's like learn that lesson. You get that beaten over your head, and we get that. And I don't think I should have people trying to assault me or take away my constitutional rights for just acknowledging that as a fact of life and fact of nature. That's what they
right.
feel entitled to do right now.
Yeah. And we're seeing that crumble too. The more that we are seeing people address the whole over drugging issue, across the board, the more that we're seeing, for example, yesterday was Prescription Harm Awareness Day. So the more that we're seeing people discuss this, the harms of
Good.
certainly the neurotoxic site poisons, but also just a lot of prescription drugs. Even things like Cipro have caused akathisia, and caused a lot of
Hmm.
nervous system damage. So it really is a shame that we've had so many tragedies that have had to happen. And really, in traditional channels, we weren't getting that acknowledgement. I am grateful for the doctor I had who had prescribed the medical marijuana. Dr. Odie was one of the only people that
Hmm.
listened to me, um, and he was telling the truth within the medical records that were coming out. You know what I mean? But he was working with a corporation too that's corrupt.
Oh yeah.
I hope and pray, knock wood, that he's going to be able to get an independent practice, because he's a very good man. He's a great doctor, and I appreciate his help, and I appreciated him respecting me as an autistic woman who had been mislabeled and was
Yeah.
clearly dealing with a lot of very terrible physical issues. So I do feel like, I can handle the fact that I've gone through so much, for it to serve a greater purpose for me to speak up about what was happening at Edgewood,
Yeah.
with the gentleman that we saw in the documentary, because I'm horrified by that, and with so many people in the population of Baltimore. They've been misusing, red bone community, black and brown people, basically as lab rats there for way too long, stealing our property, on
Hmm.
phony baloney, medical kidnappings, putting liens on people's houses, really, intentionally like whipping people's nervous system to a point, and just, playing off the poverty profiteering.
Yeah.
Got to stop. It's got to stop. And I see it in Detroit, and I see it in Cleveland, and obviously in Baltimore, and in DC itself, in the city of DC itself. I've seen it in so many places. Um,
Hmm.
and it really needs to stop, and people do need to look at it, from a larger perspective, and look at what our history has had in this country, and really globally, certainly since World War II, because we've seen this being applied in that way with these corrupt corporations and the gilded
Oh yeah.
age. Uh,
It's not been a liberating event for America at all. I mean, it's been the growth of the monopolies, and we've lost so much, and that's why we have so much paranoia too coming out of these people, because they think that you think like they do, so they're going to be projecting their fears. They know that their bullshittery is really majority of what they're about. So they're just going to keep doing that, and they don't even respect other people enough. They don't feel that they have to be honest with another person, and they don't even feel that they have to be honest with themselves. And this whole thing has twisted our social morals to the point where we don't know which way is up and which way is down anymore. And that's really the problem, because yeah, I think the vast majority of these poverty related issues and a lot of the addiction related issues could be solved for re-embracing of, an integrative spiritual approach.
yeah.
But man, we're still fighting it. But it is interesting that this same persecutorial group of psychiatrists that were demonizing all of the psychedelics and whatnot. I think, as I was just saw the other day, that somebody has moved a DMT based nasal thing into stage 3 trials to basically let you need a hit of DMT, you can do that to ease your anxiety or whatever. I don't, that's that's going to be interesting. There's a whole lot behind that that I need to find out more about. But the point is, um, okay, so then why did we put up with the 1950s through the 2024s range where all that stuff was very heavily demonized? It was used by intelligence services to conduct experiments, and all these pseudo theories were advanced from Synanon to chemical imbalance to everything we could do to get away from it, to the point where now it's looking like, well, maybe I guess they can't run away from it anymore. Maybe it's catching up to them, but they're still trying to maintain legitimacy by saying, oh, what are you evolving now? I mean, this is the thing that drives me nuts about this industry is that they
Yeah.
just hop and hijack and produce something, and they call it, the panacea. It's going to cure everything. Here we go. It did the same thing with SSRIs. It's never ending. Go back to the beginning, and it's all about social control, and it's never about truth. It's never about facts. So now that these same kind of mentalities, these same spiritually hostile people are going to start crawling into the, that whole notions of psychedelics and things of that nature. I don't see anything good coming out of their involvement in this.
I don't either. They don't want to heal anybody. They want to create permanent customers, and
Hmm.
therefore they don't want to teach. They don't, and that's why I feel like, those of us who have the spiritual practices, and those of us, in the indigenous communities and all, really need to be able to take our own power back, and build a framework that is outside of all that, outside of the
Yep.
corporate control, outside of big pharma. because I also wouldn't want to see another Matthew Perry type situation. That poor young man was unable to get the support to sort of walk through the sort of tendency he had to want to escape into something. He never quite learned to sit comfortably with himself, and instead
Right.
went into all this ketamine, and you saw what happened. And that poor man. I'd always enjoyed him as an actor. There seemed to be such a vulnerability there, and a willingness to be to have his pain sort of on display. I guess you could say he played things with a little more depth and shading, and I'm just sorry that he handed such a crock of crap,
Yeah.
and a mountain of lies, instead of actually being helped to move forward and away from whatever it was that was bothering him so deeply.
Yeah.
And this is what we need to be able to teach. So it's not going to be found in anything exogenic. It's not to say that there aren't uses for people to sort of go deeper into themselves and pull out a lot of that stuff. But that's the thing. It can't be about, oh, here, now you take this every day until you're bombed out of your mind. And I'm afraid that's what the tendency is going to be. There's not going to
Mm.
be, they just want to create other customers and make it look like they're doing something that they're not doing. They're just doing the same old thing. Uh,
Right.
and
Is
not really getting to the what needs to happen for somebody to heal. It's a finite period of time, and then people can go off on their own, because there is no permanent, oh, you need help the rest of your, no bullshits. Make somebody heal, make them whole,
mm,
allow them to move on, give them their autonomy back, give them their inner strength back, give them their inner peace back. This is not, nobody
yeah.
needs to be dependent on somebody else for, oh, I need permission to feel this or that. Bullshit. You can learn how to do that, and it is about being empowered. And I think this is a difference for what we're talking
Yeah.
about. We want to empower individuals, and then to have people come together as empowered individuals, as a collective, to be able to celebrate that connection. That's the difference in what we're talking about. These folks want
Mm.
to isolate and disempower and have control. We don't want that. We want people to control themselves, to come in and participate in a community again. It's a huge difference.
Yeah. Big difference.
Yeah.
All right. I lost my timer, but I think we're getting close to our hour. What do you think?
Yeah, we are.
What time is it?
It's
All right. All
5:34.
right.
Goes quick, man. It goes quick.
All right. Cool. Another great discussion. Fun. Appreciate your time.
Always here too, hon. And God bless. I'm glad you're feeling better, and I hope you have a wonderful week ahead. And I think there's
You
a Synanon
too.
documentary on
You
them too.
too.
Yeah. Yep. So see you next
I'm
week.
gonna
Enjoy.
watch that this weekend. And all
Yeah.
right. All right. See you later. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right. See ya.
See ya.